This aircraft is carrying so much fuel that part of it exists only to carry the rest. No engine failure, no mechanical fault, just fuel quietly working against itself. And somehow, that's the only reason a flight like this is possible at all. This video isn't really about the world's longest flight. It's about the limit hidden inside that fuel, and the strange lengths engineers go to work around it. A nonstop flight from Singapore to New York sounds unlikely on paper. Nearly 19 hours in the air, crossing oceans and continents without a single stop to refuel. Singapore Airlines does exactly that, flying a modified Airbus A350-900 ULR. The obvious fix is to just add more fuel. But that's exactly where the real problem begins. Look closer, and something's missing. This aircraft carries just 67 business class seats and 94 premium economy seats, 161 in total, and not one of them economy. Fewer seats should mean less revenue, so why remove an entire class of paying passengers? The answer isn't comfort, it's weight. Need more range? Add more fuel. It sounds like the easiest fix there is. But aircraft don't treat fuel like a car does. Every liter has weight, and that weight has to be lifted into the sky. Add fuel, and the aircraft's takeoff weight increases. So the engines work harder from the first second of takeoff, burning through more fuel just to get off the ground. Think of hiking with a backpack. One extra bottle of water is nothing. Keep adding bottles though, and you slow down, tire faster, and need even more water just to carry the water you're already carrying up the trail. Aircraft hit the same wall, at a much larger scale, except instead of a few extra bottles, it's tons of jet fuel, and the trail is thousands of miles of open ocean. Engineers have a name for it: the fuel weight paradox. The farther you want to fly, the more fuel you need, but that extra fuel needs fuel of its own just to be carried along for the ride. Add more, and the return keeps shrinking. The first few extra tons stretch the range meaningfully. Each ton after that buys less distance than the one before it, until eventually, extra fuel barely moves the aircraft any farther at all. That's why no aircraft has unlimited range. Not because tanks can't be made bigger, but because physics pushes back harder the more you try to fight it. There's a point of diminishing returns built into every long-haul design, and no amount of clever engineering makes it disappear entirely. Fuel isn't even the only wall in the way. Every aircraft has a maximum takeoff weight, the heaviest it's allowed to leave the ground. That number comes from the strength of the wings, the landing gear, the brakes, the airframe, even the length of runway available to get airborne safely. The A350-900 ULR was certified at a raised MTOW of 280 tons specifically to support this route. Engineers can push that ceiling upward with better materials and stronger structures. They can't ignore it. So if fuel is capped and takeoff weight is capped, something else on this aircraft had to give. Picture the aircraft as a giant scale. Fuel sits on one side, and everything else sits on the other. Passengers, baggage, cargo, catering, crew equipment. Add weight to one side and there's less room on the other. That's the payload range trade-off, and it's why Singapore Airlines removed its economy cabin. Fewer passengers meant less baggage, less catering, less overall payload, and more of the aircraft's weight budget freed up for fuel instead. On a flight this long, that extra weight margin becomes one of the key reasons the route is commercially and operationally viable at all. Singapore Airlines actually flew this exact route once before, from 2004 to 2013, using a different aircraft entirely, the Airbus A340-500. It burned nearly 40% more fuel than the aircraft that eventually replaced it. And as fuel prices climbed, the economics simply stopped working. The route was canceled outright, For 5 years, nobody flew nonstop between Singapore and New York at all, until the numbers finally worked again in 2018, with an aircraft built specifically to solve this exact problem from the ground up. Airbus didn't beat these limits. It redesigned the aircraft to work inside them. The tanks themselves aren't bigger. Airbus modified the fuel system and increased the amount of usable fuel the existing tanks could safely carry, adding roughly 24,000 extra liters without adding a single new tank. Combined with that, raised 280-ton MTOW, refined winglets for better aerodynamic efficiency, and Rolls-Royce Trent XWB engines, built for long-haul economy. The aircraft's range stretches to around 9,700 nautical miles, certified under ETOPS 370 to fly more than 6 hours from the nearest diversion airport over open ocean. None of this breaks the rules, it just moves the ceiling a little higher, one careful modification at a time. Removing an entire cabin still sounds like a strange business call. Fewer seats should mean fewer tickets sold. But every passenger on a 19-hour flight brings more than their own body weight. Baggage, meals, drinking water, cabin supplies, all of it counted against the aircraft's payload. Business and premium economy seats also earn far more per seat than economy ever could, and enough travelers are willing to pay a real premium to skip a stopover entirely that the numbers work out in the airline's favor. Business travelers in particular tend to value a direct flight far more than the time it actually saves, especially when someone else is covering the fare. This was never purely an engineering fix or purely a business strategy. It only works because both problems were solved at the same time. But solving the money side doesn't finish the job. How the aircraft actually gets there matters just as much as how it's paid for. The shortest path on a map isn't always the cheapest one to fly. Flight planners study jet streams and upper atmosphere winds before every departure, because a shorter route flown into strong headwinds can burn more fuel than a longer one flown with the wind at its back. Airspace restrictions over Russia have made this harder still, forcing dispatchers to redesign long-haul routes that used to be far simpler to plan. And the same fuel math plays out completely differently, depending on what's actually sitting in the seats. Hand this problem to a cargo plane, and the answer changes entirely. UPS's Boeing 747-8 freighters can carry enormous payloads, but loaded that heavy, they often can't fly their longest routes nonstop, so UPS stops in Anchorage to refuel and swap crews before continuing across the Pacific. A passenger airline plays a different game. A business traveler values landing sooner far more than saving on fuel, and many will pay directly for that convenience. Cargo can wait as long as it needs to. People usually don't want to. The physics are identical in both cases. The economics decide everything else. Engineers solved the airplane. Then they discovered the airplane wasn't actually the hardest part. The passengers were. Close to 19 hours in dry, low-pressure cabin air across multiple time zones puts real strain on the human body. Dehydration sets in faster, and the internal clock that tells you when to sleep has no idea it just crossed a dozen time zones in one sitting. Blood oxygen saturation also drops slightly at typical cabin pressure, which is part of why everyone feels a little foggier by hour 15 than they did at hour 1. Airlines now treat all of this as an engineering problem too. Cabin lighting programmed to shift toward the destination's time zone, meals timed to ease jet lag rather than just serve food, and dedicated crew rest areas built to keep people functioning for the length of the flight, not just the aircraft. The ceiling keeps moving. Every generation of aircraft pushes that ceiling a little farther. First it was 16 hours, then 19, soon 22. Qantas's Project Sunrise adds a rear center fuel tank to a modified A350-1000, cutting capacity to around 238 passengers to make room for it, aiming at nonstop flights from Sydney to London and eventually New York, lasting up to 22 hours in the air. Each extra hour makes the engineering exponentially harder to pull off, and the trade-offs only get sharper from here. It isn't the first time Qantas has chased a flight like this. Back in 1943, with the usual route to Britain cut off by war, the airline flew stripped-down flying boats from Australia across thousands of miles of open ocean, navigating by starlight. The flights were long enough that crews watched the sun rise twice and nicknamed them the double sunrise. 80 years later, engineers are chasing something similar again, just with far better tools. At the start, we asked how an aircraft carries enough fuel to fly almost halfway around the world without stopping. The answer was never more fuel. It was better engineering, a working balance between weight, payload, aerodynamics, and economics, pushed one careful limit at a time. This flight still shouldn't work on paper. But somewhere between physics and engineering, it does, every single day.